visible today, which we'll see soon. 1912 is when the French arrived following the Treaty of Fez, which created the French Protectorate of Morocco. And it's also the time of a terrible pogrom called the Tritle in Fez, when it was actually the capital of Morocco. During the 3 days of violence, 45 Jews were killed, although some estimates are higher. Over 70 were injured. 12,000 Jews found themselves homeless and took sanctuary in the precinct of the king's palace. But a Jewish population of 10,000 was reduced to 8,000 and forced to survive on charity. Many of that Jewish community, out of fear, converted to Islam. And it's believed today that 25% of the city's Muslims were originally Jewish, but it's really hard to find anybody who admits to it. I've got friends there who are Muslim, they really look Jewish, they're always really curious about my Judaism, but if I ask them, they'll never admit that they've got Jewish roots. It's also ironic that this pogrom took place after the Jews celebrating the Mimuna at the end of Pesach with their Muslim neighbors. This was not the only pogrom in the last century. Between 1954 and 1948, about 23,000 Jews left when the State of Israel was reborn. And when the French left in 1956, the exodus of the rest of the community began. Most left for Israel, but those who could afford it went to France and Canada. So we've come to know a new narrative of Jews and Muslims living well together. In fact, we hear it from the Moroccan Jews living here in London, but this is because they were young children when they left Morocco, and their parents protected them from the atrocities that I mentioned here that was going on around them. So it's very natural that their memories were good. So let me explain about Fez and its different sections. There's the old walled Medina, which was built in the 8th century, which has got lots of different quarters inside it. Adjoining it is Fez Jadid. This is the new city. It was actually built in the 12th century and is next to the Mellah, which is the old Jewish quarter. Now, the Jews no longer live there, and they've moved to the Nouvelle Ville, which is the modern part of the city, which is built from the French from 1912. The Mellah is next to the King's Palace, and it's pretty run down now. So what we do is we're going to show you pictures, first of all, of Fez, the old city, and then we'll go through to the Mellah. So if you can just hang on 1 second while I get my photos together. Let's just grab these here. Okay, you can actually, before we start, this is quite an interesting history here. I don't know if this is coming up on your screens. But
Michelle, you need to press the share screen button.
Oh, right, sorry, hang on a second. Let's get back there, share screen, 1 second. Share screen, sorry. Right, so that should be here. Right.
Should like be a green button at the bottom on your control bar in the middle.
Hang on, I'm going back because I'm back. I'm on my photos, which says share screens. Hold on. Photos.
Zoom share screen, and there's a green little arrow.
I've pressed that, and now it's telling me it's asking me which one.
Yeah, perfect. You're there.
Have we got? Okay,
yeah,
fantastic.
You're on.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to start off in the Medina. Here we go. And so I'm going to flick through these and tell you about the city, which is really very, very enchanting. It's very similar to Jerusalem. It's on a hilltop. It's got winding, narrow alleyways that can only be crossed on foot. You feel like you're in a time machine going back 1,000 years. The unfamiliar smells are a real shock to the nostrils. In fact, I'm going to play that little mini video there. So this is what you're seeing all the time, just as you're walking through the streets, because no vehicles can get through. So absolutely everything is transported by donkey. Wherever you go, you've got to jump out of the way. The smells are very strong. We're going to see afterwards the fabulous tanneries. These are the porters. So instead of getting a taxi, if you've got goods to transport around, you look for one of these guys to carry your shopping for you. You find them by the old gates, all of these people. And you also see people, these are like on the gates to the city, and you'll see the traders turning up in Mercedes and offloading everything in with the porters to go to their little stalls inside. The city's full of artisans everywhere. And if you look in all of the different alleyways, you'll see that they're crammed with little workshops. Everyone's chiseling away, carving wood. It's absolutely fascinating. So this is, yeah, you can see here, people are walking along with livestock all the time. When you buy your washing powder, you buy it by the scoopful. Here you've got the skins out to dry. These are the small tanneries, but these are the major tanneries here where all of the tourists go to see, but also they're working tanneries. They've been there for 1,000 years. You can literally see people inside all of the dyes, and afterwards you see all of the donkeys going around with the dyes, the dyed skins on their backs. So yeah, that's the fish market. These are all the small alleyways. This guy's making tambourines here. I have a fascination with doors, so you'll see loads of, that's the doors to the artwork for our lockdown. So this is the city. This is me who's found the matching turquoise door. And when you peep inside, you've got all of these beautiful riads with lovely gardens and little restaurants. So yes, this is how it is. It is very much like Jerusalem. That's at sunset. And that there is the home of Maimonides when he lived in Fez. So it's just behind here. This was, and it was during Ramadan when I was there this last time. So there's loads of stalls selling sweets. Not that anybody would be eating in the daytime, but we'll go on to that afterwards. And you can actually see people there just going to the fountains to wash their clothes. It really is going back to another world. That's a lady who makes dresses for me. This is where goods get weighed, trimmings, all the things I like in the fashion business. Here, there's all these little shops full of interesting braids and different things. This is traditional Fez style for the dresses. This is the embroidery they do. So. And this is the river that runs through. Yes. Well, and this is the park just outside. I'm getting nostalgic looking through all my photos. All of the pets there sleep outside. Nobody has their dogs in the homes. At night, you see all the dogs huddled up together. So I think we're probably back. Yeah, not yet. And you'll see everywhere, there's shops selling things for weddings. I can't believe how many places there are for making items for weddings and furniture. And this is the great Moses Maimonides restaurant, Moses House, which is just underneath there. Okay, we come to the end where even the traffic lights, I notice, are Moroccan style. Every little detail is handmade. Now we're going to go next to the Jewish quarter, to the Mellah here. So we've got what I showed you at the beginning with the history here. And then this is the doors to the King's Palace. which is right next to the Mellah. There's always security outside there. This is the Jewish quarter, which is quite different. They actually have balconies on the outside. In all of the Muslim homes, they're very closed on the outside. And here you've got lovely balconies so that everybody can look out onto the street. It's very, very different architecture there. You can see here. And you can also see where there were Jewish people living. You can see the mezuzahs that existed beforehand. You can see where they disappeared, but if you have a look there, you can see the positioning, and you notice this in a lot of the houses in the Mellah. And the streets are wider around there. So now, in a moment, we're going to go and have a look at the buildings are actually falling down. So they're spending money now on the scaffolding to restore the buildings. In fact, I've got photos here. There's a second Jewish museum, a synagogue that was restored, which we'll see. That's for sale, because I was considering at one time of buying a house in Morocco, and I did consider in the old Jewish quarter, but it's not really Jewish anymore. It's pretty run down. So this is as we're looking through to the cemetery here. This is the Jewish cemetery, we can see in here. And one of the places here, this is really interesting. This is the tomb of Lala Salika. She was a Jewess from Tangier who was executed for refusing to convert to Islam. Her shrine has become a pilgrimage for infertile women of both Muslim and Jewish faiths. So people come from all over Morocco just to visit this tomb. So we can see this is the writing on the outside of the tomb. Now, you don't actually have any of the Jews living in this area anymore. They've all moved over to the new part, the Nouvelle Ville. And this is still the cemetery. This is quite old, these photos. My daughter was very little there, I can see. Now here, this was a synagogue that became derelict, and then it became a boxing ring here. But, oops, that one's missed out. But actually, it's been restored now, and they've opened it as a second museum. This here is the synagogue. It was built in the 1920s. The floors are made of traditional Zalige tiles, and there's beautiful lanterns hanging from the ceilings, engraved with names of departed relatives, and the walls are embellished with Moroccan plasterwork. And what's quite interesting is that the services do start really early. They start at 7:30 in the morning. Why? Because everybody's off afterwards for work. So I don't think people are quite as religious as they might appear on the outside, but the whole community, which is very, very small now. When I first started going, I think in the 80s, it was much bigger, but I think there's about 50 people left. And most of the Jews there commute all the time to France. They've all got second homes. Everybody's living there with suitcase syndrome, just in case the king dies. And they're worried that they've got to leave in a panic. So, and you'll notice as well that the Jews there, they all dress very well. They really stand out from the local community. Now, we're going to go, all right, that's still in the synagogue. Okay, now we're going to go to my school. One of the reasons for my trip was actually to learn Moroccan Arabic. It's been a hobby of mine collecting North African furniture, textiles, antique for 35 years now. And I've started importing, but it's really hard, the language, because all of the tradespeople there, let's just go to here, All of the tradespeople there speak the local Moroccan Arabic, Darija. And the Jewish community don't speak it a lot, not the ones who live here, the Moroccan Jews who live here. They never actually learned a lot, only to speak to their staff and their maids and what have you. Because what I learned, the reason being that when the French came and they built this new city just outside of the main Medina, all of the Arabs stayed in, and they actually locked the doors at night. So these communities were very, very separate. There was no mingling together. And so all of the Jewish community spoke French together. So it wasn't a spoken language amongst them. So I decided that I was going to try to learn the language. And interestingly as well, the local Arabs there, they speak, the people who are the tradespeople, not the middle classes, but the tradespeople, they don't speak French. It's really difficult. I was surprised because I speak fluent French. And when it actually came to getting things made and speaking to craftspeople, which I'm good at in French, I couldn't. I found it really difficult. So I decided to go to Alif, which is the American language school in Fez. It's the most fabulous place. And it was during Ramadan as well. It wasn't a deliberate choice, but I wanted to go in the summer when I was quiet work-wise, and it seemed like a good choice. It's an absolutely beautiful school. I mean, to study in classrooms like this, if you're somebody who loves Moroccan architecture, you spend more time looking at the ceilings and the walls than probably listening to the teacher. So that's the library there. That's me when I arrived. And it's had beautiful gardens. And they also had part of the school was in the old Medina. It was actually, the school was in the Nouvelle Ville, so in the modern part, but they used to put on all these fabulous Andalusian concerts and cultural events there. So you could see all of these places. There might be a moment. Did I record anything? Yeah, we can just have this little sample of an Andalusian concert. Really delightful. And that's me trying to study. This is back at the Riyadh with lots of homework to do every day. I'll talk about the Riyadh afterwards. Yes, lots of work. And this was all the students from my class. This was at the end. So we had a little party here. There was always very interesting films on in Arabic. And there we are. So now we're going to go on and talk about Ramadan. When I was actually expecting the worst, I knew from all of my friends, Jewish friends there, that they leave during Ramadan. The Jews leave because people will apparently lose their tempers and everything. Loads of street fighting, but I was really surprised I didn't see any of it. You know, there's no smoking during the day, there's no public eating during the day, but I was very pleasantly surprised with everything. At the end of the day, everyone's ready for iftar. When you break the fast, you're waiting for the imam, everyone's staring up at the sky. There's your lovely iftar meals. So traditionally, the first food passes the lips. The first food you eat is dates and milkshakes, and there's also honey-drenched almond paste-filled sweetmeats that are eaten with harira, which is a tomato and chickpea soup, hard-boiled eggs dipped in cumin and salt and breads, and often with onions and spices. And then afterwards, after everybody's eaten, everybody's out on the street enjoying themselves. There's me. Can all have a giggle. I can't hear you giggling, but I was very lucky. I was invited to lots of people every evening, so I felt when in Rome, and I definitely ate very well when I was there. So yes, those are all the little presents that people take you with all of the sweets. All of the children are dressed up in the evenings. Near where I was staying, there was like a fun fair at night. So everybody is out in the evenings. And then this is at the end when it's Eid and there's like fabulous parties. It was like going to a wedding or a bar mitzvah and everybody's dancing away. And yeah, it was really nice, and people partying on the streets till late. So it was a big celebration after the month of fasting. And nobody actually knows when Ramadan ends because they wait for the imam to see the moon, and so he's the one who decides if it's ending on the Thursday or the Friday. Now we're going on to where I stayed. I stayed at Riyadh Bustan. It was great to stay there, and there's a big story behind this. I did have the opportunity to stay with a family, which probably would have meant that I would have learnt more Arabic. However, I chose to stay here. And interestingly, this Riyadh is very beautiful. It was in the Place Recife, which is a really nice part of Fez. But interestingly, I nearly bought this house in 2004. And I was in love with this house then, but I changed my mind at the last minute. I just thought, oh, do I need this responsibility and everything else, running a home abroad? I can well imagine that if I turn up, there'll be water leaks and God knows what, and I won't really be having a holiday. But you can see it's just got all these amazing carvings. This was like the view from my bedroom window, which was really wonderful. This was like leading up to the Riyadh. There's me always doing my homework. That's just a little passageway outside. Again, everything's by donkeys. Now, interestingly, this photo here is my own photo, and this was from 2004 when I was going to buy this place, and it had trees in the courtyards, which actually the new owner has removed, but he's restored it beautifully. In fact, he spent an absolute fortune on it. It's in a really nice part. It's probably Place Recife. It's actually a valley. It's built Fez. It's like two hills and there's a valley in the middle, and there's lots of walking up and down, and this is right where the river runs underneath, so it's flat there, whereas everywhere else you've got to walk around. So let's just check what we've got. That's the owner sitting next to me, Mustafa, who bought it and knows that I wanted to buy it beforehand. So during my stay there, as well as studying, I was also doubling up as hostess to the Riyadh. And interestingly, you see that table there, this is from 2004, this photo, when I was going to buy it. And the person who'd owned it previously, who died, was a carpenter, and he'd made that table. And so you can see, that was in the corner, and you can see it there when it's been painted with traditional Moroccan style there. Yes, these were the original photos of it. So now, while being a student, I decided to go with everybody to do all of the trips to the desert. So this is the Mazuga Desert, which is actually where we went. It's really close to the border with Algeria, not Algiers, Algeria. And it's known as a gateway to Erg Shabi, which is massive expanse of sand. This is how it was when we turned up. And there's literally camels crossing your path. This was a great place that we stayed at. This was like getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So it was a really long drive. It was like a 7-hour drive there. This is Berber style doors. We went to sleep in the desert overnight. We did this fabulous camel trek So you can see that wasn't me going to Sainsbury's. So this was the whole train. This was all the students here, and we went off, and you can actually see from this map, you can see Fez at the top, and you can see down below where I went to. And here's it's very biblical, this, looking at all of the camel trains. That was being there for the sunrise. So we went in all these little trains along there. There was probably about, I don't know, there must have been about 50 of us. And then next was the trip to Volubilis and Meknes. So that gives you an idea here. This was the Christian kingdom previously. And we can see this is the relics here. Lots of stalks everywhere in Morocco on the tall buildings. And this was going to Meknes, which is really beautiful. Everywhere there's these just beautiful doorways, and you can see my fascination with the local plasterwork. Even the phone antennae are disguised here. And this is somebody doing the traditional plaster work. This was the King's Palace in Meknes. So you can see everywhere they're making things for weddings, wherever you go. So Jews settled in the region of Meknes before the advent of Islam. The Hebrew inscriptions been found on the remains of a synagogue were uncovered in the excavations of Volubilis, which is near Meknes. A chronicle note testifies that such persecutions occurred in 1140 and adds that in 1247, during the wars of the Marinids, many Jews lost their lives or were forcibly converted to Islam, while there was an earthquake in 1340 and several courtyards just caved in, as well as the synagogue. So, yeah, it's got a lot of interesting Jewish history there as well. Now, I'm keeping an eye on the time. So, the royal family, everybody loves the Moroccan royal family, whatever religion you are. This is the family here. You can see the king with his son in the background. His estranged wife is 2 doors away. I'm not quite sure who this lady here is, but I know that's actually his estranged wife. But wherever you go in Morocco, everybody has got a photo of the royal family, the king in their offices. It doesn't matter. Can you see down here, even in these tiny little cabin shops, everybody, wherever you go, has a photo of the king. And as far as the Jewish community are concerned, everybody has. They adore him and are petrified in case he gets murdered and they have to flee. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Now I'm bringing this to an end here with the photos, unless anybody's got any questions and wants to come back on this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop share. Hold on a second. Here we are. So if you've got any questions, now's the time.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle, for that wonderful tour. Since we can't travel at the moment, it's particularly appreciated.
I'm glad I went last year, because I've been meaning to do that trip to study there for the last 10 years. And last year I just thought, you know, I've got to do it this year. And I just did it. Whereas if I decided this year, it wouldn't have happened.
Right. And have you actually used the Arabic you learnt during your course?
Very It's really hard. And I found that the people I knew, in fact, everybody at school felt embarrassed, sort of trying with each other. I was understanding. And then towards the end, I kind of found that I would open up and practice with street traders, like the guy selling the corn on the cobs and things on the street. I knew I wasn't going to see him again. So I didn't feel shy or embarrassed. But when it's people you know, and even in the Riyadh, which was a bit of a mistake staying there. It was beautiful and it was luxurious and I absolutely loved it. But I noticed the other students who stayed with families who all had dreadful stories of, you know, buckets as showers and God knows what, but they learnt the language quicker. So there's a balance, isn't there, with that?
We have a question from Vicky Bogal to Michelle. Did you travel all that way down by camel and how was it?
No, it was a 6 or 7 hour coach journey. So it was a long way. I couldn't have done that on the camel. It was when we got there and we got to the hotel and then afterwards we took the trek to the camp and it was fantastic. It was really lovely. But no, it wasn't all the way by camel.
Elliot Ainley has a question. He says, were you anywhere near Casablanca? He's actually been there a few years ago. He went to the mosque and the Jewish quarter.
Well, no, it's not. You know, it's not near at all. I've been to Casablanca before and it's got an amazing mosque that everybody in the country contributed to it being built. Literally everybody, when they were raising money for it, everybody in the country contributed to it. So it was voluntary, but apparently everybody did.
And this question from Solomon Godsey, I think you've touched on this, but perhaps it bears repeating. What is the situation of the Jewish community and what kind of Jewish life is there today?
Well, the community there lived very well. You know, all the people who stayed and didn't leave live very, very well. They've got a great life, but it could change. It could change. You know, the Arab world's very volatile. You know, a couple of years ago after the Arab Spring, things were risky. So people have all got second homes. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't got a second home.
And Sarah asks a related question, actually. Were there daily services at the synagogue or just on Shabbat?
I'm not quite sure on that, to tell you the truth. I have to say, during my last trip, I was much more involved in being in the Medina all the time, and it's got its own life. I wasn't really checking out what was going on with the Jewish community. I knew they'd all left. I knew that people leave during Ramadan, so there wasn't, I don't know whether they had services or not. I mean, there's a Jewish centre there, the Maimonides Centre, and there's a kosher restaurant there. There used to be another kosher restaurant there, a guy called Max, who sort of travelled between Jerusalem and Fez for this kosher restaurant that he ran. But I don't think he couldn't make a go of it. There weren't enough people for, you know, to keep it busy all the time.
Madeline Cohen has a question.
Hello, Madeline.
Political here. Is there any noticeable Islamist influence in Morocco, and what is the attitude to the Palestinians?
Well, that's a subject you don't mention. You don't mention the I word. You don't mention Israel, because that's when things flare up. You know, everybody watches Al Jazeera all the time. And I mentioned at the beginning, you know, before there was Al Jazeera beamed into everybody's room, everything was fine. But now it's changed. You know, you get on really well with people, but if the subject comes up of Israel, Palestine, they support their Muslim brothers in Palestine. They're the poor Palestinians. It's so terrible. What's quite interesting, they're very charitable towards all the Syrian refugees. You see Syrian refugees on the roadside with plaques, and the taxi drivers and people, they all stop and give money. They really feel, I found that very touching, that they were all supporting the Syrian refugees and welcoming them into their communities.
And I remember you told me, Michelle, about the deal struck between the king and the Islamists, especially when you went on your trip to the desert. Can you tell
Yes,
us a
you're
bit
right.
about that?
Yeah. What's interesting, because I'd done that trip to the desert in 1988, Fez to El Rashida, I think it was. And it was really run down and everybody was living in these mud shacks. Whereas this time, going down on that road, everything was beautiful villas and fountain, like beautiful roundabouts. You'd think you were in Paris with fountains in the middle. And I was explained by one of the teachers who was sitting next to me that all of this has been done in the last 10 years. And it's the Islamist parties in Morocco who come from the south, who've had sway, they've had influence since the Arab Spring, and they've insisted that money goes to the south to spread it's a wealthy country, but to help the impoverished in the south. So I definitely noticed a massive difference.
David Rubin has a question. Why did you choose to visit Fez so often as opposed to Meknes or Marrakesh, for example?
Yes, well, there's something really special about Fez. Marrakesh is beautiful, but it's become very touristy. It's full of people on their bachelor nights and hen nights, and it's not so authentic, you know, whereas Fez is very, very authentic. It's got something about it, you know. I love art and craft, and it's all traditional, and it's not actually done for the tourists. It's not done for the tourists there, whereas in Marrakesh, things are done for the tourists now, whereas there, it's all original. I like making things or having my own designs made. So I find it fascinating and communicating with people there and getting things specially made and what have you. It's fantastic. Yeah. So that's my reason for Fez.
So Bruce Greenberg is planning to go to Essaouira in November. I hope you get there, Bruce. And his question is, can you tell us anything about Essaouira and why are rugs so popular in Morocco? And by the way, he and his wife spent part of his honeymoon in Casablanca and Marrakesh.
Oh, lovely. Well, actually, we have on here Ruth Hadjioff, who's actually got a second home in Essaouira, so she can probably tell you a lot more about it. I've stayed in her lovely home. Rugs is very traditional in Morocco. Yeah, there's all different types all over the country, different styles. Everybody tries to sell you one all the time. Wherever you go, there's always somebody jumping out of nowhere to try to sell you a rug. And I'm going to let Ruth, if she wants to, answer any questions about Essaouira. Can Ruth answer? What was the actual question specifically about Essaouira?
Yeah, I think he just wanted some more information on Essaouira, but we've unmuted Ruth, if Ruth wants to come in.
What kind of information?
Hi, Ruth.
What's he interested in?
Well, can we unmute Bruce? No, Bruce, who asked the question. Okay, just a second, we're just finding Bruce. Right, so you can both ask questions and answer them. Bruce, you're on.
Oh, hi there. Oh, thank you for turning me on. Yes, my wife and I are hoping we'll be able to go there in November. That's hard to predict. But what about security in Essaouira, or for all of Morocco for that matter, and restaurants, food, get a lot of couscous?
I've never had a problem with security, and I go there alone. There's amazing fish, really fresh fish straight off the boats. And the biggest synagogue has been restored and made into a museum. 2 other synagogues have been restored. And there's one Jewish person left, Joseph Seabag. He has a gallery, and he's always very charming. You can go and talk to him.
One of his pictures here.
I used to know a Jackie Kodesh years ago, like 10, 15 years ago, and he was very active in the Jewish community in Marrakesh and Essaouira.
Yeah, I believe so. What else can I tell you? It's small. It's about the size of Hampstead. It's a fishing port, but it's being restored to have a marina. So they're hoping to make it, you know, a little bit more upmarket. There are three cemeteries. There are two Jewish cemeteries, the older one and the newer one, and there's a Christian and a Muslim cemetery. And when I was buying my house and looking at houses, these caretakers were saying to me, "Oh, it's not the same here since the Jews left. We wish they hadn't gone."
Oh. It's also known for its purple haze back in the day.
That's the islands. There are two islands which are a bird sanctuary. They have the Eleanora falcon, and they have these mollusks that grow on the rocks outside the islands, which produce the purple dye that the Romans used to use for their togas. So that's where it came from. It is purple. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Are you sure you don't work for the Moroccan Tourist Board?
Can I add to that on security?
Yeah, go on.
I don't worry about it, but you've got to dress correctly. You know, you want to be covered up as such. You want to respect the local community. You know, like when I see girls going for these hen parties in Marrakesh, I find myself thinking maybe I've turned into an old prude. But I sort of think, oh, you're asking for trouble there. Like that, you've got to be respectful of the community. But I go on my own, and I don't have a problem. And I think somebody asked, was there a question here about me being, Lucille said.
Yeah, Lucille. Lucille Cohen. Her question is, were the Arabs with whom you mixed aware that you were Jewish? And if so, did they refer to your religion?
Yes, people did know that I was Jewish. Not everybody, because I don't walk about in London. I used to always walk around with big stars of David and what have you, but I don't. So I wasn't going to when I was in Morocco, but people knew that I was Jewish, and that's fine. And you know, people do say that they miss the Jews there, but I didn't feel threatened at all. I felt perfectly safe.
There's a question here from William Pike. Again, it's about Casablanca. Of course, you didn't go to Casablanca this time, but he did ask, did you dine in Rick's Cafe?
Oh, right, from the film. I didn't, I'm afraid. No, unfortunately not. Yeah, I didn't move from where I was. And I only ever went to Casablanca once. It never actually pulled me to go back again. It was very French. It sort of felt like I was in Marseille or somewhere. It didn't stir me to go back in the same way that the older cities did.
And I have a question, and that's about the Maimonides Museum. What is there inside the museum?
No, there's not a Maimonides Museum. There's a cafe there.
Oh, the cafe.
But you can't actually, it's where he lived, and they just point it out, and there's a restaurant underneath, which didn't look very appealing, I have to say.
So there's nothing inside his house?
No, there wasn't anything really exciting. They could have. I mean, you know, somebody who's enterprising could change it and you know, make it into a tourist feature, but no, there's just some little cafe underneath.
Right. Well, are there any more questions? I think we've probably exhausted all the questions here. So on that note, I think we will wrap up.
Can I say thank you to everybody? Thank you for listening. You know, it's a difficult time at the moment. So, oops, have I gone? Am I still here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm advertising the future talks here.
Oh, okay, fine. Sorry, I'm sort of nosing and seeing who's here. So, yeah, I just want to thank everybody. It's a really difficult time, and it's just really nice seeing everybody from around the world who's tuned in to listen. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Nitsa Spira, for being our co-partners here. And I just want to remind everyone, we have more lockdown lectures coming up. I'm giving a talk with Jimena tomorrow on my book, Uprooted, and you can book through their website. Next week, we have Ashley Perry, who will be answering questions on Jewish refugees and their place in Israeli politics. And we have more lectures planned for the following week and the week after that. So please do subscribe to our Harif website, www.harif.org, in order to keep up to date with everything that's going on. I'd just like to thank you all for coming and joining us this evening. There will be a recording on the Facebook page. And thanks again. Stay safe, stay well, and see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Very much indeed.
Everyone
Okay,
can say goodbye.
thank you.
That was great.
Go down.
Can I ask, how do I pass this on to a friend of mine? He's originally from Morocco. Can I pass it on for him to watch?
Yes, I mean, you can
Thank
invite
you very much.
Facebook page, Harif Facebook page.
Okay.
I might watch this other thing.
And if anybody's got any questions they can think of afterwards, it's michelle@harif.org.
Okay, thank you.
How do you know? Oh God!
Get rid of mute, everyone.
What happened?
I want to get myself off. Let me just a minute. You.
Can't go out, they'll just get hot.
And they're never going to go?
Well, they'll go out eventually.
It's only 1 hour and 50 minutes.
Okay, okay, keep going.